Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're returning to War in the Pacific Admirals Edition, our Let's Play series against XTRG, where we are playing as the Allies and XTRG is playing as the Japanese. The war is into February of 1942 in this long-running series of ours. It's been about 2 weeks since our last turn. I've been a little bit behind on that. But as you can see here, we are moving into late February. We're more than halfway through, so to me that's late February of 1942. And we're hoping that the war starts to turn in our favor. The Japanese have taken the bulk of Celebes, they've taken the bulk of Borneo, and they are threatening to move into Java. Meanwhile, we have a massive campaign underway in China, trying to extricate our army of about 500,000 men out of Changsha, as the Japanese are moving in and sort of surrounding them and trying to cut them off from retreat. They've dropped units behind our lines with paratroopers and cut off our supply lines, or at least our effective supply lines. And so we'll have to see how things play out. Meanwhile, Japanese submarines apparently are hitting harbor defense mine layers with torpedoes, which seems kind of absurd, although it is always funny when you get that little graphic when like a tiny, basically a speedboat, gets hit by a torpedo and it's like, the boat is obliterated. And that's always kind of fun to see. You can see the harbor defense mine layer, motor launch, no surprise, it sank. Japanese battleships are back at Ambon, pounding the Dutch defenders there. That's probably our best. I'm really curious why Ambon, by the way, has heavy guns, because it does have like 9-inch coastal guns, which is one of the few places in the Dutch East Indies that does. And I'm curious, I mean, I can kind of see the strategic location at the corner here of the Sarum Sea, between one of the two natural straits through the sort of Celebes and the New Guinea area, but I'm not quite sure about that. Anyway, the O-23 was hit by a depth charge there off Ambon by Japanese anti-submarine efforts. Oh no! We lost a sub! We fast-forwarded through that one, but it looks like Japanese destroyers sank a Dutch submarine, the K-9. Was hit by 7 depth charges and sunk. I think that's only like the 3rd sub we've lost all war. We also apparently lost the Nautilus, which I didn't even realize was badly damaged, but apparently the Nautilus was sunk, and Commander Brunus was killed. That's an American submarine. I think only our 2nd American sub to have been lost so far in this war. We've claimed quite a few Japanese submarine sinkings as well, so I'm probably using my subs a little bit too much in shallow water situations, especially with bad torpedoes. What do we have here? Japanese task force is attempting to evade combat. Japanese anti-submarine warfare task force, 2 subchasers, subchaser 7 and 9, evaded combat with the armed merchant, or is it a mine layer, the Tangier, which had been escaping out of the Philippines. You can see we also engaged another task force here with 3 Japanese ships. We'll go ahead and fast forward through this combat phase. Oh, nice! So it looks like the Tangier engaged 3 patrol boats, hit one with 3 shells, set it on fire, hit another with some shells here. These are anti-submarine Japanese task forces that we just engaged with a light surface vessel of ours. What? What are you talking about, P. Warner? Alright, more depth charging off the coast of Celebes. That time, no damage to the Dutch subs here. Air operation phase. We'll kind of fast forward through this. Japanese fighter sweeps over Changsha. As you remember, we're trying to evacuate out of Changsha with our army. I'm not sure if they'll all get out this turn or not. Large-scale Japanese raid on Singapore, 38 Sally bombers and 17 Lilies. So that's about 60 or so, I guess technically 55 medium bombers and 62 fighter escorts. As a reminder, we really don't have anything there anymore. So they're just hitting the airbase and the runway. They didn't really do any damage to our ground troops there, so that's good. Second raid coming in with 20 Ki-30AM dive bombers, 7 more Sallies, and 8 Oscars. You can see some Japanese aircraft are losing some damaged aircraft to flak. No real damage there. 21 Ki-30ANs coming into Bataan, trying to hit the Americans that are sort of cut off there. A couple of Japanese aircraft damaged. No reported damage to the ground forces. Same for some IDAs that come in as well. Some 34 Sonyas are hitting Changsha with no fighter escort. That's kind of unfortunate that I didn't leave my fighters there to engage him. They did do a little bit of damage to our ground forces there. I really should have left my fighters over Changsha. He only had 10 zeros sweep it, and now it looks like 10 nates as well, but the nate's kind of crap. So if I had left the Flying Tigers out there and the British fighters as well engaging there, we might have had some success. They're hitting those troops of ours. Again, we're trying to pull west across the river there, so we'll see how things work out there. More raids over Singapore, small raids, sort of discombobulated raids. They're a little bit disorganized. We got one of their aircraft with flak. Some more Sonyas over Changsha, not really doing any damage. The Sonya only carries a 50-kilogram bomb, so it's not a very effective bombing aircraft. It's more of a harassing aircraft. More raids over Bataan, and this is just getting a little bit monotonous through this turn. A lot of his raids got broken up. Potentially some coordination penalties, not quite sure. Quite a few of his aircraft are being damaged by flak. That's a positive, I guess. He's doing some recon on sort of the islands to the southeast of Java, so perhaps he's planning on moving up there with more landing forces. He has been slowly working his way up there. Also looks like some Japanese submarines off the southwest coast of Australia. We do have some carriers out that way. And some H-81 Flying Tigers up against 22 Japanese fighters here to the west of Changsha, flying cap over some of our infantry there. It looks like we lost 2 Flying Tigers, shot down 1 enemy 0. 2-for-1 trade with zeros versus Flying Tigers. Definitely favors the Japanese, although I'm okay with it. Anything that kills more Japanese pilots is something I am okay with. Whew! Gotta catch my breath there. After about 10 minutes of me just basically giving like a baseball or auctioneer type announcement. He's hitting some of the troops to the west of Changsha, perhaps trying to delay our withdrawal or hit the troops in the rear. I'm imagining he's going to try and press forward from this base that he captured across the river last turn and drive into our rear to cut our retreat off from Changsha, but I'm not 100% sure of that. I probably should have withdrawn north away from sort of this sector in here with these 2 cities in our rear. That would have been a cleaner retreat option with less likelihood of being cut off, but I didn't go that way. More ASW work, nothing really matters. Nothing really matters! Japanese heavy cruisers bombarding Wencao off the Chinese coast. 500 casualties. Wow, that was an effective bombardment. Gotta wonder how much longer Wencao can hang out there. Probably will fall before too long. Japanese bombardment at Changsha, and haha, psych! Joke's on you, Japanese! The Chinese forces have withdrawn across the river out of Changsha to at least temporary safety, as they will continue withdrawing west and then eventually north toward this city that his paratroopers took to get back in toward Quyang, where they can have relative safety there before the Japanese can do too much damage to them. So we definitely lost some casualties and some power there, maybe about 1,000 assault value there, but at the end of the day we got all the troops out, at least from that hex without being surrounded. Meanwhile, to the east of Yichang, Japanese deliberate attack, a division and a brigade are hitting a Chinese corps to the east of Yichang. That was really just there as a stopgap, sort of a speed bump to delay his advance on Yichang. We're going to have to fall back from Yichang as well toward Quyang, so that's worth calling out. We lost about 1,000 men. Japanese bombardment at Wencao. They still haven't seen fit to launch another fixed assault there against the defenders there. Bombardment doesn't do too much damage, although we did notice that primary corps of ours that's good at defensive is down to almost dropping below 300 assault value, so that's kind of a bit of a warning sign there. Bombardment here at Kaigan. Japanese forces are actually losing casualties, so they're bombarding American troops on the island of Mindanao, but the counter-battery fire coming in from the American troops there is doing more damage than the Japanese bombardment. That's great for us, but it is one of those sort of short-term things because we definitely don't have enough supply there for that to become a norm. La Terme is captured and both of the Dutch troops there surrender. So that's about 300 surrendered, 300 prisoners taken by the Japanese to the east of Dili on Timor. Dili. And then Loblum also falls unoccupied. Japanese shock attack at Jeston on the northeast coast of North Borneo. They'll take that base as well. That's inevitable. Allied bombardment attack against the 2 Japanese divisions at Bataan continues, and we continue to see a moderate amount of success as we burn through our own supplies. Looks like we have about double their assault value there. 12 combat squads disabled. We did destroy one of their guns. Shock attack here on the southwest corner of Timor doesn't actually take the base despite 18-1 odds for the Japanese. We lose 123 men. The Japanese lose 24. Nothing was destroyed there, so that attack was costly for us, but it didn't result in any defeat. Kushin, Japan advancing that far into China is a game limitation or a flawed representation of the realism of the campaign. In any event, it's a game. Siangatan expands fortifications to 3. Auckland expands port to 6. Newcastle expands fortifications to 3. And that does it for the turn. The land combat in this game is definitely flawed. But every game is flawed to some extent. So... partisan attacks at Changsha, really? Huh. Guess I don't have enough troops there. All right, some cargo ships are arriving. It's going to kick us out of the save file here in a minute, and I'm going to go ahead and reopen the game file from the post turn. So here we go. Kind of miss J Street, guys. I haven't seen him around in a while. Maybe he doesn't like me anymore. All right, so we got into the Chinese theater. You can see where we're driven back into Yichang. We actually just have this one core in Yichang. The rest of the Yichang defensive force of almost 1,500 assault value is already pulling back. They're on their way. They're another 92 miles to get to their destination, which is at Changthe, sort of here north of Changsha. And west of a river line here. So we're going to give up Yichang. We're going to fall back and move in to retake Chikikang. So that's something we're moving toward. We also have the 60th Chinese Corps moving toward Tuyuan, another one of those cities that the paratroopers took from us. They should arrive probably in 2 days' time, I would guess. Maybe 3 days' time. They've come from Quyang. We also have some troops that are on the way south, some artillery and some engineers and some infantry on the way south from Chongqing. Apparently, it said I don't know how we took it was Changsha that we took the garrison penalty from because we completely withdrew from Changsha. Meanwhile, the force at Changsha has moved west towards Siagatan. You can see here we have 4,800 assault value here. This city, despite having level 3 fortifications now, also does have some pretty negative aspects to it in that it is in clear plain terrain, so there's no urban advantage like there is in Changsha. There's no rough terrain advantage like there is at Quyang. Despite the fact that it's a level 3 fort, it's not a place we want to make a stand, so we do want to continue withdrawing further west. So actually that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and issue the order to withdraw further west towards Shaoyang, which should get us to safety if all of our troops are set to move and then they all follow. We should be able to get there relatively quickly here. You can see all of those troops are now set to follow. We just have to move 46 miles to the west towards Shaoyang. It's possible the 8 Japanese units and 80,000 troops here try to precede us there and get there before us. You can see here we have about 1,000 assault value here in the city. With 2 Chinese corps, the 53rd and 59th, are both in really good shape. Everybody has enough supplies, at least for now. Not enough to replenish, but at least enough to hold, probably for an attack or two. Only 1 fort level here, so that's not very good. It is also in plain terrain or flat terrain. But the hope is that since the Japanese haven't moved to Shaoyang, even if they get there next turn, our troops should be halfway there. And then presumably they won't be able to launch a shock attack immediately. It'll take a turn to do so. So then if they launch an attack 2 turns from now, then our 5,000 assault value should be showing up from Sigatan to aid in a repulse, and a bloody repulse of the Japanese at that. Meanwhile, we are moving some light forces to the west toward Chikikang as well to try and help retake that city, or at least get adjacent to it, because, again, they're going to have to cross a river line, so that's not great. But that's the situation there. In any event, the situation in China is fluid as we are trying to move troops around and be a pain in the ass for the Japanese. Meanwhile, in the north, near Nanyang, the Japanese have 7 units here in the mountains to the northeast of Nanyang. They also have 1 unit to the south here. We are working on getting our troops into Nanyang and then also falling back either on Ankang or on Xi'an. We can see we can already have about 1,000 assault value here and 4 Chinese corps, which are moving toward Nanyang as well, sort of to reinforce this major crossroads town. I'm not too worried about this one individual unit because I'm pretty sure I attacked and beat it a few turns back, but these 7 units here could try and move to this roadway here behind Nanyang and cut us off. The only thing is they've got to move through a mountainous terrain with no roadway support, and they would run out of supply. And our own troops could just withdraw west along this roadway without even being cut off unless he cuts across another roadway with no supply line. I think we're relatively safe from them doing that. They may move directly south on Nanyang, but in any event, I think we're somewhat okay there. We've got about 500 assault value in the town. We've got another corps on the way there with another 100 plus, and then we've got another 800 on the way as well. So we should have around 2,000 assault value there before he can get to that city. Rusturus, thank you very much for the follow. Greatly appreciated. Meanwhile, up north near Sayan, we still have a strong force in the mountains up here, about 2,000 assault value. And then in the city of Sayan itself, we've got another 3,400. So a very strong defensive force near Sayan. I think he would have to weaken his drive in the center of China to support the drive in the north of China, although I could be wrong there. Japan is so overpowered in China itself that it's sometimes hard to keep track of. Meanwhile, troops in the south here on the southern line, despite the fact that they're enemies in our rear, we do have one roadway here between Kwayang. It's a bad roadway. It doesn't give great supply, but at least in theory, we're not cut off. Once this corps arrives here, we're hoping it opens the railway back up to us. And no new drive here in southwestern China either, so that's the situation in China. Bataan, meanwhile, still 31,000 supply. Surprisingly, our bombardments aren't really eating through a whole lot of that. You can see here we've got some of our units here. The Manila Bay forces continue to launch bombardment attacks here. They've got a little bit of fatigue and a little bit of disruption. I think that's the only unit no, we've still got our artillery units, so coastal batteries, field artillery batteries. They're continuing to bombard the enemy, but they're not burning through much supply. And they actually are doing a fair bit of damage to the Japanese defenders, so I'm okay with that, as much as we can harass them. Singapore still has 28,000 supplies. The defenders there still have over 1,000 assault value. If the Japanese launch a concerted assault there, they can probably overrun and destroy us. Really, the key of our defense lies on 2 Indian divisions, the 11th and the 9th, and then the 27th Australian Brigade. The 22nd is also relatively strong. And then we've got a bunch of other lighter forces there. Meanwhile, in the north, near Rangoon, it looks like we've got 3 cargo task forces all in the port. I think they're all docked. They are. One of them is nearly done unloading. The other 2 still have a little ways to go. Rangoon itself is up over 24,000 supplies now. I think it was down to around 12,000 at one point. So that's good for us. Troops moving around, but not a lot else going on there. We did detect some Japanese submarines, supposedly anyway. This could be fog of war. It's not really certain how clear they are over here. That could lead to some detection on our aircraft carriers, although we are claiming no detection value against them, so that's good. They are moving to Perth. The British have already pulled their carriers into Perth. Replenish task force from port. Yep, did that. All right, we'll go ahead and disband them. Surface convoy or surface task force, disband them. Sub patrol, they need to repair. Tanker is docked and unloading. 5,000 more fuel is unloading at Perth there from them. We've already got over almost 200,000 fuel in Perth, and now we've got the entire British carrier wing here currently at port, the Hermes and the Indomitable, and then we've got 3 American carriers about to join them. The Hermes has just 1 ready swordfish. That's it. A single swordfish is all she's got on her air wing, as well as 8 Albacores, so 9 aircraft. Meanwhile, the Indomitable has arrived and has 12 Fulmars, 9 ready, 18 Albacores, 6 Sea Hurricanes ready, 3 in reserve. So she's not as well armed from a air wing perspective as the American carriers, but has an armored flight deck and is still a quality piece there. Our troop ships, tankers, merchant ships, etc. worth a lot of victory points. Yes, they can be. Is the Queen Elizabeth still in Cape Town? I think she is. Yep, Queen Elizabeth here. Queen Elizabeth is worth 71 victory value. She's currently undergoing repairs. She didn't actually take any damage. I just kind of wore her out, so I ran her flank speed for a really long time, so she took a lot of system damage. Basically, you know, you're running a ship at flank speed for a lot longer than it's designed to, and things break down and you take damage. So she's repairing right now. She's worth 71 victory value. For reference, that's basically worth 2 American heavy cruisers, or worth 1 Japanese heavy cruiser. So they're very valuable ships. Not as valuable as battleships or carriers, but sort of the most valuable thing after that, if they're really big like the Queen Elizabeth. Not all of them are, and so really it depends on the size and the importance of the ship. You can see down here there's a couple of tankers here. The Gulf Coast is a good tanker, makes 14 knots, carries 9,400 fuel. She is worth 20 victory value, which is pretty good, but not like massive. Just a little bit less than a American heavy cruiser, close to what a light cruiser's worth. The Belida, which is a slightly smaller, same speed, only worth 18 victory points, and so you can kind of get a sense of, you know, how the value of those shifts. These 2 merchant ships are worth 6 each because the Allies have a shit ton of merchant ships, and they're actually just nothing special. They're just Transmarine cargo class, somewhat small, only 3,000 tons. Okay, so we kind of looked at India, we looked at China, we looked at the American carriers off Australia. We can see here that we're still trying to reinforce Port Moresby. We've got 2 companies of troops, A Company and C Company, about 18 assault value total between them are on their way to Port Moresby. They're still probably 2 days away. Port Moresby already has 196 assault value there. We have some additional troops that are arriving next turn, the 83rd Australian Battalion of Infantry here, carrying some CMF infantry squadrons, so 36 infantry sections, 6 Vickers support sections, and 34 support sections, 460 infantry, 408 support troops, total assault value of 42. So between the 18 assault value that's about to arrive at Port Moresby and the 42 that are about to unload there, assuming there's no Japanese subs that surprise us, that should give us around 250 assault value. Again, a lot of these troops aren't terribly great troops. The 45th Indian Brigade has Indian troops, but their experience is only level 30, so nothing great there. The morale is decent at 50, but the experience is not great. The 49th Australian Brigade, or battalion, is there. 33 regular infantry squad, so better experience at 40, but their morale is only 32. So not great there. The Port Moresby Brigade, meanwhile, 35 experience, 34 morale, so they kind of suck all around. The base force, 40-47, so just not great troops, to be honest. Port Moresby is working on its fortifications. They're up to level 3, but I'm a little bit uneasy if he sends like a full brigade there, whether we'll be able to hold or not. We'll have to see. I think he would certainly win, but the hope is that it takes long enough to sort of delay him. If we go back to the reports from last turn, we go to last turn, it looks like we lost... Oh, so we only lost 1 ship, according to this. We lost the K9 Dutch submarine here, 5 victory points, and we lost the Harbor Defense Mine Layer. It doesn't say the American Nautilus was sunk. I'm not sure where that report came from, but I also don't see the Nautilus. So it's only saying we lost 1 sub. Maybe that was just an erroneous report. I'm not quite sure. Okay. Both those groups are falling back to Surabaya. Are they moving at flank speed or mission speed? Mission speed. That one's flank speed, so we'll move that mission speed. Don't want to take unnecessary damage. Probably should pull them back too, since they're now being ordered to guard a section of the strait that's irrelevant. So we'll pull them all back to Surabaya, or at least some of those subs. Some PT boats are trying to find port of refuge. They'll probably sink at sea. They don't have enough fuel to get anywhere. The Zeeman, meanwhile, has run out of fuel, starting to take heavy system damage. It'll probably take 2 days for her to get to Sankaden, where she can pick up some fuel. No supplies there for her, however. The Tangier, meanwhile, burned through almost all of its ammunition there. It's 3-inch ammunition. One might wonder where she's going. guess we can try and run her into Singapore. That's probably the closest port with a meaningful amount of fuel. Does say she can make it there. Why does it have her going that route? Just absolute threat tolerance and a direct route. I don't really care if Tangier gets sunk. It's only worth three victory points. But I would just rather it get there sooner rather than later. Stingray and Seawolf, no damage there. For those ships off the Borneo coast. Skipjack, meanwhile, a fair amount of damage. If we take a look at the aircraft losses last turn, we're showing 6 139 WH-3s, which I believe were all destroyed operationally when a base fell. We lost 5 H-81A3s, 4 in air-to-air combat, probably over China. That's a little bit unfortunate. Japan lost 3 Zeros, 2 Oscars. We lost 2 Hurricanes, so 13 aircraft, 8. If we look at top pilots lost, none of our aces were killed last turn, so that's good news. Still, we have 2 aces dead, but our top ace, T. Cole, 8 kills, flying with the Flying Tigers in China. Ship availability, what's coming in soon here? We've got a couple more cargo ships coming in next turn. We've got the heavy cruiser, we've got the light anti-aircraft cruiser, the Van Heemskerk, arriving in Mombasa off the map here in 2 days. Tanker Norfolk, destroyer Hotspur, some subtenders, some submarines, some destroyers. What about capital ships? I don't think we've got any coming on for a little way. 20 days for the USS Hornet, a fleet carrier. 24 days for the British Formidable, and 68 days for the British Illustrious. So 3 more carriers coming just outside of 2 months. And then the Wasp comes in June along with the North Carolina. The Valiant comes in July. So that's the scenario there. Battleships heading toward Midway, still being detected. That's a little bit uneasy there. Do we have any SIGINT? Any interesting information about SIGINT? Tillad Eden, Cook again. Just trying to see. Cavalry Regiment planning for attack on Singapore. That's no surprise. Yeah. No new SIGINT. I thought those guys were supposed to bombard Midway last turn. That's deeply frustrating. I had ordered these battleships to move in at flank speed, and it said they were going to bombard Midway, and they didn't. It said they should have been in range of bombarding Midway. Which really makes me nervous, because this is like 5 battleships out there just sailing on super slowly, just hanging out. They've been under detection for at least 3.5, maybe 4 days. They're not making any progress toward Midway. I really don't understand that. I can't just leave them out there. If I just leave them out there, we haven't seen the Japanese carriers in a while. I have no idea where they're at. The last time we saw them, they were way over here, but I think that was just the light carriers, if memory serves. So that's a little concerning. Still unloading those troops here. Looks like we unloaded all the troops at Vavu. We're trying to unload everybody at Pago Pago. Apparently we can't dock because of task force size. I'm guessing we can if we get rid of some of these ships in the task force. Yep, we can dock these guys now, which is important, so we can unload them and then switch them to amphibious and then move them back to Vavu to unload the rest of the troops. Vavu, meanwhile, about 112 assault value there. U.S. Marines, big chunk of the 2nd Marine Regiment, 2nd U.S. Marine Corps Paratrooper Battalion, and base force here, working on building that base up, expanding the fortifications, expanding the port, making it a more defensible link in the Fiji line. We've got Fiji on the left flank. We've got Pago on the right flank. We've got Vavu as sort of the center point there. Probably shouldn't leave these destroyers up there for too long. I'll have them pull back to Pago where there's fuel there for him. Just making sure he doesn't land any surprise landings on the Hornen Island. We'll also fall the light cruiser up there back. Just don't want to keep him out there too long. We're unloading more equipment at Auckland. We're starting to build up our force there. We've got about 350 assault value on the North Island of New Zealand. U.S. Marine Tank Regiment or battalions there, combat engineer regiments there. The Auckland Fort is there. Some Auckland armor, brigades, different units here. Part of the 1st New Zealand Brigade. Where is that other base? The 1st North Auckland Battalion is located further up. We could move it back down to Auckland and form the 1st New Zealand Brigade, which would be a more effective fighting force, but it then would kind of limit our ability to defend the entire island. Not too worried about them landing down there at this time, but just something to be mindful of. Various sub-patrols arriving here. They probably need a bit of a break to rest and refit. But yeah, that's the situation right now, February 19th, 1942. Don't have a lot else to share. Don't have a lot of other plans at this point in time. That's probably going to do it for this stream or episode, just because I don't have a lot else to share, unless there's anything else that you guys are really interested in seeing before we wrap up here. Typical logistical stuff that I'll do off screen. Probably send the turn to XTRG some point tomorrow. Probably not in time for him to do anything with it tomorrow, but he'll have it so he can do whatever he wants to do as of Monday. I know he's in school, so that may mean nothing till later in the week, but I want to make sure that I don't forget any of my logistical trains. As a reminder, you got to do a lot of logistics in this game. You got literally thousands of ships, and I've got to make sure everybody's got fuel and is their right destination. We've got a bunch of cargo ships coming back to the West Coast after transits to Australia. We've got other ships that are on the way, reinforcing some of our islands to the south of Pearl. We're reinforcing sort of the line islands here at Palmyra. We're up to 43 salt value here, trying to bring in additional reinforcements at Palmyra. Christmas Island already has reinforcements coming ashore. 3,000 troops coming ashore on the 206 group here. If we move some of these ships around, we can try to make it possible to dock. What's the task force here? Total dock space in Christmas Island is 12,000 tons. These guys take up over 25,000. Yikes. Well, I think all of these guys are under 12,000 tons, so I can turn them into individual task forces and dock them one at a time. Not super efficient, but we can do it. Oh, that's a tanker. Not what I wanted to do. Troops, where are you? So to the President Buchanan first. Dock and unload. It's not that they can't unload without docking, but it is that they can't fully unload certain types of equipment. Greyhound looks interesting, Sergeant Twinkie. I'm a little uneasy with seeing destroyers dodging torpedoes, not because destroyers never had torpedoes fired at them, but because it was a very rare thing. German U-boats were not after the destroyers. They were after the merchant ships, and targeting destroyers was an inefficient use of resources. So it does irk me a little bit to see it trying to make it the destroyer's in peril. It's okay, in some circumstances, yes, that was true. There was a sort of famous scenario where one American destroyer had its bow blown off or something off the East Coast, but that was very rare. So I hope they treat it with a little bit less of an arcadey kind of a approach. Sergeant Twinkie, I have not played the old game Carriers at War. The map is 40 by 40, Gus. So these are 40. Each one of these hexes is 40 miles by 40 miles, and it covers the entire Pacific theater from the Indian Ocean at Karachi, all the way south to Australia, New Zealand, just north of Antarctica, really, down here in the corner, I'm assuming. It goes all the way to the U.S. West Coast, and then there are off-map hexes that are represented but aren't, strictly speaking, you've got the United Kingdom over here, you've got Panama down there, you've got the U.S. East Coast sort of off-map as well, Canadian East Coast off map as well over there. You've got the Middle East. You've got bases at Abadan and Aden, both represented over here. So you've got off-map locations like at Cape Town, but for the most part, it's the Indian Ocean, and then a big chunk of the Indian Ocean, and then all of the Pacific Ocean, as far north as Alaska, as far south as the Gambier Islands or as New Zealand, and then just to the west of South America, which is not on the map. All right, and that's going to do it for another episode of War in the Pacific, Admirals Edition, our play-by-email game against XTRG. Not a lot else to add for this turn. Obviously, I'm going to go ahead and send this over to XTRG probably Sunday afternoon, so he'll get it and be ready on Monday, and then whatever his schedule works. I know he's a student, so he's not available all the time, but I'm going to go ahead and finish things off screen, and then we will catch up with you guys next time. Until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I'm out.